Welcome to Business Smarts Radio with Tom and Dr. Dave, the clean approach to building your successful business. Now, let's introduce Tom Borg and Dr. Dave Miles. Welcome to Business Smarts Radio with Tom and Dr. Dave, where we bring you the clean approach to building your successful business. And when we mean clean, we're not talking about spick and span and dust mops. This podcast is all about the acronym CLEAN. We're all about communication, leadership, engagement.
And no drama.
So today we have a special for you. We have a series that we're going to be doing on the 4 strategies to navigate the next 4 quarters. So really what we're looking at is 4 key areas that companies and businesses and nonprofits would be well advised to take a look at and maybe address over the next 12 months. And when we looked at that, we were looking at actually things like, what to do over the next year, over the next 6 months. And honestly, can you really think of exactly what your business and what the landscape is going to be like 12 months from now? I mean, 12 months ago, there's no way you could have seen this probably back in March and April, because we're in September, maybe by the time this comes out, close to October of in that time frame, fall of 2020. Did anybody think in March and April that we would still be kind of where we're at, depending on what part of the country you're at, in September or in the fall? Nobody would have thought that. So we kind of wanted to take the approach of taking it quarter by quarter. So it's 4 areas of concern that you would want to take a look at, really 4 strategies to navigate those next 4 quarters. And the 4 things that we're going to be looking at over the next series of 4 podcasts are this. 1, employee stress levels. Okay. 2 is communication. 3 is emotional intelligence. And 4 is adjusting to the changes. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about employee stress levels. So what are your thoughts, Tom, before we get into some of the questions? What are some of your thoughts on generally about employees and management stress levels?
Well, one thing's for sure. There are stress levels that are elevated during this time. We've got people that are working from home, and they've got issues balancing that scenario where they've got children or they've got spouses working there. Now, these people are together for the first time like this ever, possibly. So how do you balance that? That's a concern. At the same time, people have got concerns about, if I do have to come into work on a periodic basis, I don't think I'm going to be too sure that I'm going to be as healthy as I could be by just staying home. If I just stayed home rather than going to the office, I might be safer at home. So these are some other areas that are going through people's minds. So I think it's important to get an understanding of where your people are when it comes to their stress levels and what they're thinking and what their fears and concerns are.
This is true. And like I said, it's a lot of ways totally unprecedented. And we were kind of laughing beforehand. I mean, it's one of the things that seems like the cortisol and the adrenaline have been, to talk about the stress hormones, have been flowing kind of like the Mississippi River. I mean, they have been no shortage of stress and stress hormones and, just in general, just detrimental effects overall, just from a psychological and psychiatric background and social background. And not just, there's always trade-offs when it comes to protecting your health. But when you're staying away from people, we're social creatures and by nature. And we've had, years and years and years of that's just how we are. And to have for whatever reason, to be away from that is very tough. And even with, and it does produce a lot of stress. And think about what is the worst thing that if you go to prison, what is the absolute worst punishment that they have? I mean, beyond the death penalty for murderers, but I mean, beyond that, what is the worst thing they do to you in prison? If you act up, you misbehave, something happens, you cause them problems. What do they do? What's the worst thing they do? Solitary confinement. They put you in solitary. Yeah, they put you in solitary. They put you by yourself. And think about it. You almost had the whole country for a while. It's getting a lot better now. But you think about the stress that comes with that. And so how has that manifested itself into the workplace? And maybe what can you do to do that? So we had a couple of questions that we wanted to do. Is how has the following affected not just your employee stress levels, but your management stress levels? So you think about it. I mean, we're always talking about the employees, which we really need to be focused on. We're there to serve them because they're the ones that are there serving our customers. But honestly, what kind of toll is it taking on your leadership and your management too? But we had a couple of questions. Like 1, workplace adjustment. How has the following affected your employee and management stress levels? in response to workplace adjustments? What are some examples of the like remote versus in-person work? I mean, do you have staggered hours? Do you have staggered days? What other adjustments do you have? I mean, so how has that really affected the stress level? How have those workplace adjustments affected the stress levels?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Dave, I know we know in some cases with some of our clients that actually has lowered their stress levels in some ways where they don't have to commute back and forth to work. They're at home. That saves them time in terms of driving, but also the stress levels of driving in heavy traffic. So in some ways, it's been a positive, has had a positive effect on the employee's stress levels by working from home. So that's one good thing. Now, of course, the other thing that falls into place there is you've got a family together, as we mentioned a couple moments ago. Now we've got all these people in a small space for 24/7, and now that's going to create some stress. So there's kind of a yin-yang effect going on there in that respect.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that because there's a lot of times where people have asked about working from home for years. Been a lot of management that is really not. There's good reasons for it, is what I was going to say. Is sometimes you have folks that have been very much on the micromanaging end, and sometimes, like I said, great reasons for it. Sometimes it's just insecurities on their part that there's no way that these employees would do any work if I wasn't there watching over them like a hawk all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the good part, you're right, you said, has opened up the fact that we can work together or we can remotely and still be able to actually be productive. And so obviously depending on the industry, there's some things that just, there's no way you can stock a shelf. There's no way you can start an IV. There's no way you can perform an operation. There's certain things you just physically can't do, from home. But where you can work from home, it makes it nice that, like I said, a lot of people have been asking for that work-life balance, but it's almost like retirement. I'll give you a great example. If you're looking forward to retirement, and then all of a sudden, okay, I can't wait. It's gonna be fantastic. The beach and the margaritas and the travel. I can get, Mrs. and I can get in an RV and we can just go. And so you've built up to that point. Then when you put in your retirement papers, you get to go watch, you have the party, you go about your business, you've mentally prepared for that. So think about all the times that we have asked for remote workplaces. But then all of a sudden you're sitting there like, gosh, I really would like to swim in that swimming pool. Then all of a sudden somebody just pushes you into the deep end.
Splash.
And it's freezing cold, right? And it's freezing cold because it's beginning of the season. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, you're just the shock of it all. Now, once you get used to it, like it's not bad, but that's different. And think about it. Even though it's a great thing that we're eliminating the commute or whatever, there's still that level of stress where I didn't set up a home office beforehand. I didn't mentally get all my ducks in a row to prepare to remove myself from the office environment and go from home. So you got to think about, even if it's a good thing and it does reduce the commute, and it is something people have been asking for, and now several months after it, they're starting to adjust to it. Like, okay, this isn't bad. I can see, working from home, even if we could come back to the office, even a few days a week would be great. Just because of that abrupt change, I think, even if it's something we ask for, it still can end up being a stressful situation. So I think that's just something to think about going forward, which I think we've finally, kind of to the crest of that. People, like I said, are starting to become a little bit more used to working from home.
Yes.
And I think that's, like I said, somewhat of a positive, I believe. And I think in the big scheme of things, once, I believe the figures that I saw recently was that it saves companies about $11,000 per year per employee having them work from home.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it could have some, some stressful effects on the management. Okay, well, how much commercial real estate do we need to keep?
Yes.
How much desk space do we need to keep?
Mm-hmm.
If we are able to downsize, are we able to just do that go towards stock options, or does some of that go towards the employees? Because just being honest, it's not. There's still an expense from working from home, even though you're not commuting. You don't have the expense of the commuting, but maybe the extra electricity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the
challenges that they get from that, Dave, is that sometimes they just can't be as effective working from home. In other words, you need in some cases, face-to-face interaction. You need that the exchange of ideas. Maybe there's something physical they're working with that's right there in front of them. So that can hamper the effectiveness of a company where the employees are actually physically distanced from one location to another. So that's something else that can cause a bit of a problem in that mix.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Because I mean, think about the last time, maybe last year, that you had an in-person brainstorming session. You know, think about the work that either of us do is, on the facilitator end of it. I mean, when you're sitting there with a whiteboard and a flip chart, and you get people that are, like I said, there's the energy in the room, and ideas are bouncing off of each other, and you can really kind of pin some of that stuff down. It's very difficult to recreate that over an email thread.
That's right.
And even over a Zoom meeting sometimes.
Exactly. There's certain vibrations, emotions, feelings. You can just pick up people's body language. It's certainly a lot easier face-to-face. Just the minor comments that are made that are picked up. So yes, face-to-face is never going to be replaced by a Zoom call in total. But the fact is, Zoom's the next best thing. Go ahead.
And I'll be honest with you, there's some times when you're trying to meet with a client or whatever that just to be able to see the interaction that you can works out so much better over Zoom necessarily than just picking up the phone. Because you do pick up so much more than that. And one-on-one, fantastic. Small group, amazing. If you're physically trying to focus on, because there's one physician that I listen to quite a bit, and he talks about Zoom fatigue. And if you're trying to focus on too many pictures at one time, the Brady Bunch, where you got 60 people in a room at one time, or 20 people in at one time, and you're trying to focus, it makes it really difficult to do that. So there are some issues with that as well. But that's what we're talking about: stress coming from workplace adjustments. And how does that? The second part of it is how has social distancing, masks, things like that affected employee and management stress levels? Just something to ask. I mean, one example is I've seen a lot is when you're in a common area, maybe mask up in a common area, and then when you're in your personal office with the door closed, then you're fine to take that off. I mean, but how does that affect the stress levels? I mean, when you're used to being able to sit with people at lunch and be able to talk to them if you are back at the office, I mean, how is that social distancing and mask been able to, how's that affected stress levels for people?
Well, not that, Dave. It also affects communication. You're masked up. It's harder to hear the other person. It happens time and time again. People ask to repeat what they said. It's hard to get that message through. If you have the proper mask on, that's really going to hold back the aerosol that comes from a person's breath. So that does create some physical challenges there, even though you're face to face with that mask on.
Yeah, and you mentioned about reading body language. I mean, there's so much that's unconscious in our psyche about how we read body language, how we look at the facial expressions, tonality, things like that, a little smirk from the face or the cheek or something. And, you miss a little bit of that when, let's say, just because you can't see it from the mask. You can kind of read somebody's eyes and see are they smiling through their eyes, so to speak. But, like I said, there is a few things that you do miss even face-to-face where at least you can pick that up to a certain degree a little bit better over Zoom when you don't have that. So it's just just something to think about when you talk about employee and management stress levels, because it does affect both.
It's harder. It is harder. No doubt about it. It's harder to communicate. It's harder to connect with people. But we've got to adjust, and that's part of the stress problems.
Right, and that adjustment is difficult and can cause a lot of stress. And the third one that we looked at is how is different cleaning protocols. Now it varies by industry, but how are these different, say, legal requirements beyond the distancing and the mask? We just grouped it all under cleaning protocols. How are they affecting your stress levels from you and the management? I talked to a restaurant owner like once an hour. We have to go through and thoroughly disinfect everything in the restaurant.
Yes.
Which is awesome. But I mean, in some ways it's like, wow, if you have reduced staff and you have to, or a reduced capacity, but you have to keep on this extra staff to be able to meet the extra high requirements, even though you need the high requirements, at some point with as thin of margins as they are in the restaurant industry, the thought is, well, how does somebody make it when the margins are so tight at 100% capacity?
Yes.
So that's a big level of stress for the business owner and for the management.
Wow. It's definitely a challenge that people are going to need to address as they go through whatever your business might be. For some businesses, it's really affected them where their profitability is way down. amount of customers they're able to serve is way down. Others, it's way up. And that's good in some ways, but it also creates more stress because now they've got to be able to meet this higher customer demand. And like you just mentioned a moment ago, keep the cleaning protocol up to standards.
Yeah,
So,
and it varies by industry. I mean, restaurants are going to be completely different than an industrial manufacturing plant. It's going to be different than retail. Do you deal with outside customers like a Costco or like a grocery store or a Sam's Club or a Walmart, or do you deal with internal staff only? I mean, if you screen and health check everybody and they
yeah,
wash up or whatever coming in, and you're only dealing with internal staff,
yes,
there may be a different set of protocols than dealing with outside customers. So I mean, it varies, but yes, that's definitely a big stressor on what to do. And I think the last one that is probably the most important area that you want to ask, how has your management and your staff dealt with this, is just in general work-life balance.
yeah, how's it going at home? How's the wife and kids taking all this? How is the health of your family? If you have any elderly parents that you're either living with or looking in on, or at least keeping in touch with to make sure that they're still healthy, how's that affecting their overall mindset? Because that does affect their personal performance on the job, no doubt about it. You've got to have your emotional mindset in the right place, or you're going to be suffering.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, and depending on the area of the country you're in, kids are back in school, are they not? Are they back for a couple of days? Are they remote learning only? And basically you have to, and now it's basically on to homeschool. So what do you do? I mean, sometimes you have husband or wife both or both partners working from home. Well, if you've limited space and like you said, you haven't prepared for that, as if, hey, we both run businesses that are separate, or we both work in the same business that we're able to have an office at the house, and we've kind of mentally and physically prepared for that. That's different than, we only have a limited amount of bandwidth. We have one kitchen table. Okay. Right. We have one, so where do we, and we both had to get on the phone. I can't be on the counter or the bar and you're on the table and we're both trying to talk on the phone. You know what I mean? It just, what do? You hide in the closet. You try to be a little bit extra productive in the bathroom. I mean, at some point it's like, where do you hide? Where do you hide to get that piece of productivity? And then not even talk about it. Oh, now I have to deal with the kids that they're not going back to school, because I've got some friends of mine now that are really stressing out about the fact that, hey, they have to work, they're having to work remotely, and the kids are home. It's like, well, how can I continue to juggle that? At some point, something's going to break, and hopefully it's not them. You want them to.
Dave, that's a great point there, and that's where the communication process at home has to be picked up. And that is, it's an unusual situation. Spouses need to get together, get a game plan of some kind, how they are going to do that, not just try to do it impromptu, and figure out a system, a schedule, a way to do it where everybody's needs are met and they're able to perform their duties as a worker for your organization or for their respective organization.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. So, I mean, those are just the four things to think about as far as finding out how those four things have really affected the employee and the management stress levels. So, because you don't want to forget about that. You don't want to forget about the stress of your management, even if if you're the business owner or the CEO, the stress that it may have had on you as well, because it's, there's different levels of stress all throughout the organization, depending on your responsibility level.
And that's where that leader needs to constantly check in. Hey, how's it going? Take some time to just get candid with them, ask about how the home life is going, how are they handling all that, and just keep a pulse on that on a consistent basis. Just because it's a tough time, it's unprecedented in terms of what we've all experienced in the past. So this is a special time to take on some special strategies.
Yeah, and speaking about that, like I said, we had a couple of strategies that we want to do, very simple, very just common sense that we wanted to throw out there. That and the first one was exactly what you said: get a pulse from your people. And there's certain levels that you can ask and not ask. You were talking about with wife and kids, but how is your stress level? Some organizations work fine with, you can do this in person. You can do it very informally, and that's the best way to do it. Just even if you're working remotely, just pick up the phone. Hey, John. Hey, Sue. Hey, Bill. Hey, how's it going?
Yes.
I think, is there anything I can do for you? How are you doing personally? How are you doing professionally? You don't have to get into details that are non-HR compliant, so to speak, to really show that you are authentic and you actually care about your employees. You really want to know how they're doing.
That's
because
right.
they're integral to your success, and you have to make sure and give them what they need for them to be able to do a good job. So, how are they doing? Just really get a pulse. So that could be informally, that could be more of a formal kind of a sit down, almost like an interview, kind of a one-on-one type of thing. Depends on your organization, and depending on the size of the organization, it may be one of those things that I just don't feel comfortable talking to my supervisor or the manager or the director or whoever on how things are going, because the drill. I think Marshall Goldsmith talked about it. When the admiral asks a question, it's never a question; it's always an order. The guy just got out of boot camp. He's not taking it as a question. He's not taking it. It's an order.
That's right.
So when the CEO, when the director, when the VP comes around, hey, how's everything going? What are they going to say? If you're 6 levels above in the organization, what are they going to say? Oh man, it's terrible. You might have 1 or 2 people that tell you an honest answer. Oh, chief, it's going great. I mean, what do you expect them to say? When the CEO for the hospital system comes around and they're like, comes into the lunchroom, hey man, how's it going? How things going? Oh, it's going great, boss. I mean, what are you going to say? The thing they're going to say, oh man, it sucks, it's awful, it's this, it's that. Sometimes it's tough to gauge that. So you're better off it's so important to really get a pulse from your people, and not just what 16 levels of management are telling you, but to really get down and find out exactly what it is. So for the larger organizations, what may be good is on the small, encourage your leaders to get a pulse on the small end of it.
Yeah, on a regular
on a regular basis, individual and formally or informally, kind of, hey, how things going, how just communicate with your people. But on a bigger organizational level, it may be advantageous to look at something like an anonymous assessment. If you're looking at some kind of questionnaire or assessment, for example, with a lot of our clients, we use the stress quotient. You can figure out what is the stress level kind of your management team in general, because you're their boss. But then you can also break it down by manager or by director or by VP or by whatever, and actually figure out, okay, are there significant differences in these levels of stress amongst managers? And so that way it may be a people issue as much as it is an environmental issue, a stress issue, whatever. So I think those types of tools, however you can do it to get a pulse from your people,
well, another nice thing
important.
Dave, another nice thing about these tools we know is that it also gives us ways to cope with those issues. So where you identify the stress levels through that instrument, and we're able to suggest certain strategies to deal with that stress. So that's a great tool for the manager to work with their employees once they have that report back. Hey, here's some things I can do with Joe to help him be more effective and less stressed out on the job. So it's something that's going to not only identify the stress, but give us some solutions on how to work through that stress.
Right. And there's several different ways to do it. For example, if I was working with, say, a business owner, leader, CEO, in a management team, I would probably want the management team. That might be more of you could do it anonymously. You could do it with the names on it. That would be fine. You know what I'm saying? But there's some folks that when they know their name is on it, they're not going to give you as honest of an answer as it is anonymously. So sometimes you might say, okay, well, Sue is my VP of whatever, and I'm going to, and I've got 6 of them. I'm going to check all 6 of these divisions. And so basically all of Sue's people, all of Bill's people, all of John's people, that, they're answering to them. So John's the only one that's actually doing this with their name on it, and everybody else below them is anonymous. So that way there is no issue with, I want to tell them what they want to hear, or is it going to come back to bite me or whatever. You know what? You're better off with the data than you are, and then find out where the issues are, then be able to dig and probe from there. So I think there's a lot of value, sort of like with the employee engagement surveys, there's a lot of value in being able to get, I think, sometimes better data with that anonymity than, and then that's where you dig down when you're on a smaller scale, more personal, one-on-one with your direct reports on that informal manner on, hey, how are things going? And
that would be the way to go
from there. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, so get a general pulse, So it's less, it's more anonymous, so to speak, for the person taking the assessment. But at the same time, then when you have that report one-on-one with their supervisor or their manager, they can get into some of the strategies to help them cope with that stress level that's elevated at that time.
Yeah, and honestly, like I said, it really depends on the type of industry you're in and the size of the organization. But the bigger the organization, the more that CEO, the more that executive director really needs to find out the pulse of the frontline staff, the people
That's
on the
right.
ground. And unfortunately, sometimes it can be skewed a little bit when you're talking about it. Because if I'm in middle management, do I want to tell my boss that everybody below me's losing their mind? I want to, they're all stressed or they're ticked or whatever. No, of course, it makes me look bad, and I don't blame them. I get it. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that's just life. That's human nature. It's very difficult to take bad news up to the boss. It makes you look bad. Why do you want to do that? But the person above that, you need to be able to get that information.
Absolutely. If you're going to run your company, and like we're talking about, this is over the next 12 months. We're trying to be able to strategize, get the information we need, then put together a strategy that's going to help us do the right things. So again, 12 months.
Number one.
Go ahead.
You're right. Number one, I was going to say, get a pulse from your people. That's exactly what we're going to say. Just get an initial, just a baseline. Where is everybody at? And then what's number two?
Well, the next thing we want to do is deal with, are you talking about the social distancing?
We're going to talk about playing with your people, what would work well to mitigate it. So, for example, once we get a pulse from our people, we want to plan with them, not for them, but with them. That's the big deal. Playing with your people, what would work well to kind of mitigate some of that stress?
Right.
It shouldn't all be top down. Get some of the best ideas from them. I listened to a podcast yesterday, as a matter of fact, and the guy interviewing was asking, why did you want to start your gym franchise or whatever in a franchise model instead of just you own the companies? And it's like, I wanted a franchise model because I felt like I had more people with more skin in the game that could come up with more creative ideas. And he used the example of McDonald's. He said, the dollar menu and the McFlurry, and he started giving 3 or 4 examples. He said those all came from franchise owners. They didn't come from the company, the top down. They came from the bottom up. They were some of their most popular things that they've ever done. And so how can you empower your people and plan with your people to make it? I know it's not exactly, but give them some ownership. Think of it as more of a franchise model. Their department, their division, their job, their desk. I mean, how could they own that? They're responsible for that. How can they have their input in it?
Like we've mentioned before in other podcasts, people don't argue with their own data. So it's just smart to get people to be able to contribute to the solution that we're trying to put together here. And they're going to own it. They're going to own it much quicker.
Absolutely. So number one, get a pulse from your people, at least an initial baseline. Number two, plan with your people. What you would do well to mitigate it within reason. Here's the thing. You still got to run a business. But what innovative ideas can you use to get the job done?
Yes.
But in the bottom line, it would be great if we could all just work from the beach. And maybe that little thing in the back on the Zoom background with the little palm tree going isn't an actual virtual background. That's for real. We're all on the beach with the little Mai Tai or something like that, and just stuff gets done. But you know what? That's not real life. We still got to run a business. And so whether it's in person, with social distancing, with masks, whether it's in person, however it's done, we still got to get the job done.
Okay. Then
the third thing? Go ahead.
Is rinse and repeat.
Rinse and repeat.
Go ahead.
Because once and done is not going to do it. No. I found out what's stressing my people out, and we executed a plan to fix it. I'm happy for you, Sparky, but guess what? That's once. Things change.
Stay with the plan.
If you've noticed, you're not doing a lot of 3 and 5 year planning right this second. I mean, like I said, we talked about this being 4 strategies to navigate the next 4 quarters. You're looking to look at things. Hey, what are we going to do for the next month, for the next 6 weeks, for the next quarter? I mean, just being honest. I mean, from now to the end of the year, what are we going to do between now and the end of the year? We've got, at the time of this recording, half of September, they got October, November, December of 2020. So you got, okay, I've got the last quarter. How am I going to get to January 1? And then just kind of put this rinse and repeat thing. And like I said, the cycle might be different. It may be quarterly, maybe monthly, maybe, every so many weeks. But honestly, For the one-on-one informal stuff, you should be checking in every week or every 2 weeks with your people. How are you doing? How are things going? Just very quick, a minute or two. No, yeah, it doesn't need to be a formal hour-long meeting, formal sit-down type of thing. Just how are things going? How are we doing? Is there anything I can help you with? What do you need from us? Those type of things.
Yep.
But those continued pulse checks with your people will gauge how things are going, and that will give you the opportunity to readjust and make course corrections.
That's right.
So any thoughts on kind of that continued process?
I think the key is just to be consistent with that and be sincere. And I think if we put those 3 steps together, that's going to help a huge amount in helping us make the best of these next 12 months that we've got to deal with this COVID experience we're all going through right now.
Well, I think that's a great thing for people to do. So like I said, ask how's workplace adjustments, social distancing, cleaning protocols, general work-life balance affected your management and employee stress levels. And then just a real easy strategy to figure out how to put this together, get a pulse from your people. Most important thing. Plan with your people on what you would do to work well to mitigate, within reason, and then rinse and repeat. It's just not, remember, that's not a one and done thing. Oh, I came in once a year and did the employee engagement survey. Everything's fine till the next year. It's no different than doing your annual eval. If your annual evals are in March and you tell me in March that something last April I should have done differently, man, that's bad. Right, too late, and that's bad news. Like if you'd have told me in April, I could have fixed it and got my 3% this year. So those type of annual things, you constantly have to be checking in, and at different levels of formality and complexity. But yes, just continue pulse checks with your people to see how things are going, and be willing to readjust because things are constantly changing. So any final words for the listeners?
I think the key is to take some of these ideas we've talked about today, try them out, see how they work. If you have questions about them, give us a call or contact us. But the key is do something with it. That's the key. You do that, you'll get some better results.
Sounds great. I definitely think so. And like I said, I think that's one thing that will definitely help you in the next 4 quarters. So in our next episode, we're going to be talking about communication. And so since we're all about communication, leadership, engagement, and
no drama,
then it fits well with our with our topics to be talking about some of the next strategies for the next 4 quarters to be communication. So we will see you in episode 2 of the 4 strategies to navigate the next 4 quarters, where we'll be talking about communication. Thank you for tuning into Business Smarts Radio, where we bring you the clean approach to building your successful business. And like we said, we're not talking about spick and span and dust bombs. We're talking about the acronym CLEAN. It's all about communication, which is the next episode, leadership, engagement,
and no drama.
So until next week, no drama. Take care.